Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage. What's going through your mind, buddy?
Well, you know, Jimmy, I recently learned that a person who knows to forgive is a human being. So I forgive you for all the problems and obstacles you put in my way and all the nasty and horrible stuff you did to me over all those years.
That's so nice, buddy.
Another thing I learned is that a person who asks for forgiveness is a great human being.
Uh-huh.
A person who asks for forgiveness.
Alright, good to know. Let's do the review. Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage.
And I'm Deniz, the Buddymeister.
Of all the movies that are constantly recommended to us, few have been mentioned as often as Virumandi. And now that we have finally watched it, I can totally see why. This is such a vibrant and explosive film.
We're going right into it, don't we? But I agree, I think it's safe to say that I didn't love it as much as you did, but Virumandi is a pretty good movie. It's demanding, it's fun, it's a bit silly in my opinion, and it's definitely a Kamal Haasan movie.
We have only seen a handful of his movies so far, and yet Kamal Haasan has quickly proved to us that he's one of the most impressive and unique voices in Indian cinema. Be it just in front of the camera, like in K. Vishwanath's 1983 classic Sagara Sangamam, or when he's in full control of a production, like with his 2000 historical drama Hey Ram.
And Virumandi is one of those projects. He has written, co-edited, produced and directed the film, and he starred in the leading role.
The story of Virumandi is quite complex. We get a lot of information, a lot is happening, especially in the first hour. But at its core, it revolves around the interviews of two prison inmates and their retelling of what brought them into prison.
The two inmates are Kotala, played by Pasupathy, who got the life sentence, and Virumandi, played by Kamal Haasan, who got the death sentence. They are being interviewed by a journalist, played by Rohini, who does research on the death penalty. Now, that's the short synopsis, because Virumandi kind of fans out in many different directions.
The first hour introduces us to the movie's world, this little southern Tamil Nadu village, and of course the main character Virumandi. We get this highly energetic, explosive, kind of mass introduction scene during the traditional Jallikattu event, in which a huge crowd of people try to grab the large hump on a bull's back in an attempt to tame the wild animal. But no one is able to do so until our hero Virumandi appears on the scene.
It actually takes almost 20 minutes until we reach that point. Before that we get a documentary-style introduction that's supposed to be the TV report of the journalists, which actually fooled me for being real for a second with its 4:3 aspect ratio. Anyway, like you said, the world building is extraordinary, but it's still a lot to take in.
It's pretty erratic, yes, and it's not easy to keep track with what's going on, how the different characters in the village are involved in this ongoing feud, and what specifically led to Virumandi's outbursts and of course his imprisonment. It felt as if certain information or full scenes were somehow missing.
And that of course makes total sense when the film reveals its cards, which happens pretty much exactly after 1 hour. Up until that point, the events shown in the movie were narrated by Kotala, Virumandi's arch-nemesis. And in his version of the story, also his supporter and kind of friend. But that's the point, it's his version of the story. And then we get Virumandi's version.
But not before we get this super intense, incredibly acted scene in which the reporter Angela and Virumandi meet for the first time. She, as well as we as the audience, are primed and influenced by the things Kotala has told. And we see Virumandi as this brutal rapist and murderer, and Kamal Haasan's intense performance in that scene sure helps to reinforce that notion.
Absolutely. And the thing is that at that point we don't really know how to handle these characters. We are the pawns of the narration. Over the course of the first hour, Virumandi is anything but a hero for us. He's more like a wild, unpredictable bull himself. Actually, a total madman and later also murderer. And he's just that in our minds until he tells his side of the story.
And it's kind of the same story with the slight difference that he's not a villain in it. I found it very interesting how the same events appear so very differently. The moment when Virumandi's grandmother died was kind of absurd and something to mock in Kotala's version. But here it is really tragic and heartfelt. Now all the stuff that felt as if it was missing is added. All the dots are connecting and it was really fascinating to follow it again for the second time.
I really like this kind of storytelling device, this effect. To watch a scene a second or, depending on the movie, maybe even a third or fourth time is so enriching. How an image slowly completes itself in your brain or changes is great.
Of course, this device and structure is very reminiscent of Akira Kurosawa's 1950 classic Rashomon. And just a few weeks ago I reviewed Ridley Scott's new film The Last Duel, which does something very similar. Yet in Virumandi it becomes quite clear, at least after a while, that it's not so much a question about what actually happened and if there might be a third perspective as well. It's pretty clear that Virumandi's perspective is the truth. It is his film, and after the flashbacks we continue in the present with him as well.
I think it's at the intermission where we know what really happened and where the things start to add up. It's fascinating how it juxtaposes everything that we've seen before, and it's also nice that we get a really charming and kind of relatable tragic hero in Virumandi.
At first I was wondering if the whole false or selective narration by Kotala was really necessary for the film's story to work. I was wondering if it was nothing more than just a gimmick to mislead and then surprise the audience. Why take this Rashomon concept when it's only really applied for the first hour of a 3-hour film? But then I thought about how the movie began and what issue it wants to address, despite being just a very entertaining action drama. And that is the death sentence and if it should be abolished. I mean, the movie makes no big secret about the fact that it's in favor of abolishing the death sentence, which I completely agree with. So I think when you consider that angle, it makes a lot of sense, because an innocent person can very easily be framed. And like you said, we as the audience were under the impression that Virumandi is a bad guy as well. So I think it's very interesting that the movie challenges us and shows us that you have to be very careful in taking something as the truth.
Very well said. To be honest, I did not think that much and that far, which might be one reason why Virumandi didn't connect with me the way it did with you. As much as I liked the Rashomon effect, I had a really hard time to find my way into the story. A few things that I liked were also things that I disliked a bit. But we can talk about the things that I just liked first, starting with Kamal Haasan, who does kind of his thing here, and he's awesome.
Yes, as is Abhirami as Anna Lakshmi, a really great female character in an Indian movie, I have to say. At least for the limited screen time that she's got. She's such a fierce and no-shit attitude woman, but also with a kind heart and a great sense for justice. Abhirami and Kamal have great chemistry, and it was really beautiful to see their love bloom.
And then there's Kotala, a real scumbag, a sleazy, brutal, ruthless villain. Pasupathy is also great.
Another highlight, and this is something that I love so much about the so-called Tamil New Wave, is the local flavor and the authentic and highly energetic presentation. All those crowd scenes, the focus on traditions and customs, the mechanisms and grudges of such a small village.
It's a part of what I called world building earlier. You can feel where you are, you really become a part of it. Keshav Prakash's stunning cinematography and Ilayaraja's music, of course, also play a big part in that.
Virumandi isn't just a great film because it gives us an opportunity to get immersed in this very different setting and culture, but its genre is also something that we are not really that exposed to in Western cinema. Usually we are more familiar with straight action movies or serious character dramas. But Virumandi, like several other Indian movies, is an action drama, and that's pretty awesome.
The action scenes certainly reminded me of a few other movies, but Virumandi was able to stay kind of its own thing. I was surprised how brutal and bloody some of the scenes were. Like, out of nowhere.
This was also easily one of the most brutal and shocking Indian movies I have seen so far. The violence in this one is so graphic. Sometimes it was heartbreaking, like the death of the young baby in that massacre early on. And sometimes it was borderline cartoonish and in that great 80s action vibe, with cut off arms and legs and a lot of blood.
How many times did someone have some kind of weapon stuck in his body?
I love that.
It's pretty cool, but you just said something that brings me back to the things that I liked and disliked at the same time, and that's this slightly cartoonish nature of a few scenes. I thought that the tone didn't always work in the movie's favor. I mean, I'm of course accustomed to these crazy genre-changing moments, but some things were a bit too silly in my opinion, especially in the last 45 minutes when the prison riot breaks out.
I can totally understand your issues with it, but I somehow still love that. The whole finale, the whole prison riot, which was already teased in the beginning of the film, was really something else. And definitely one of the most violent and memorable prison riots I have seen on film. It reminded me a little bit of Natural Born Killers.
Well, as I said, I liked it, but I also thought it was silly how the prisoners make spears out of the rods of the prison fence in a second. I mean, they just pull them out. How they catapult the policeman with a slingshot they built. How Virumandi, the two journalists, and Kotala chase each other through the prison. It more than once was on the brink of being a comedy. The stuff with the wounded jailer, I don't know.
I get it. By this point, we have seen our fair share of crazy and out-of-the-box movies from India. But this one was once again able to completely surprise me with its really bonkers, over-the-top last action scene. For me, it's totally understandable that this is regarded as a modern classic and a very influential movie in Tamil cinema.
Well, I can't argue with that. I mean, Kamal Haasan is someone who has broken new ground in regards to cinema more than once. He did and still does everything to bring his vision onto the screen, even if he has to use terrible visual effects and horrible day for night shoots.
I actually didn't mind the CGI too much in this one, and it's of course almost 20 years old. As far as the day for night scene goes, it looks pretty bad, but then I thought maybe it shouldn't be nighttime after all, maybe it's in the early morning hours?
Come on, and anyway, what would we say in German about Virumandi?
Virumandi ist ein weiterer Beweis für Kamal Haasans unglaubliche Leidenschaft fürs Kino. Episch, wahnsinnig kraftvoll, explosiv, brutal und mit einem Finale, das zumindest ich so noch nicht gesehen habe. I give Virumandi 8 out of 10. It's more like 7.9, but I don't do that.
For me, it's 7 out of 10. It's more like 7.2, but I don't do that either. Did you know that I was not able to find out what size Rohini's bra has?
Did you? Really? Never mind. So, what are your thoughts about Virumandi? Leave a comment. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd and also on Patreon, simply at the Jimmy Cage.
And you can hit me up on Twitter at the Buddymeister.
And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all we have to tell.